Welcome into the WJHL Plus Digital Center for Tri-Cities this week as we sit down with leaders and lawmakers from the state of Tennessee each week to get a feel for what's happening in Nashville and how it impacts us right here in the Tri-Cities and beyond. The 114th Tennessee General Assembly began early January, and today we are joined by Tennessee State Senator Bobby Harshbarger, who represents the 2nd District here in our region. Hawkins and 4th District, represents Hawkins and Sullivan County here in our region. Welcome,
well, thank
Senator
you for
Harshbarger.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, first of all, just everybody got together, opened up the General Assembly, talk about first thoughts.
Well, I've joked about this, but I think it's true. So this is the 2nd session, right? So I could no longer call myself a freshman. And so all those butterflies that, were on day one of last year, those are all gone. And now it's just replaced with good old-fashioned stress. And but no, it was fantastic. It was great seeing all the other legislators and getting back to work.
And what's that like, briefly, just to get everybody back together again? Certainly your mind kind of is always on the work that needs to be done for Tennesseans, but to get everybody back in the room again, got to be a lot of excitement along with that stress.
Yeah, I'd say the energy picked up just because, seeing some folks. I attribute it to going back to school. Because when you think about it, when you're in high school, you're in the same building with the same folks day after day, and then you leave for summer break, and then you come back. So that's probably the easiest way to explain it if you've not been there. But, everyone's got fresh ideas, including myself. We've been able to have an entire off session listening constituents, finding out what their needs are, and getting ready to go.
Well, over the course of the next half hour, we're going to dive into a lot of the high priority topics in Nashville with Senator Harshbarger. We're also going to talk about, technology and how it's advancing. Our own Haley Pitcher sat down with Tim Hicks, state representative, to talk about AI and how they're trying to control that when it comes to mental health. And we're going to give you a chance to streamline straight into the work being done by our representatives in Tennessee on our website, WJHL.com. Before we go any further, Senator Harshbarger, we're going to bring you a story from our state reporter, Tori Gessner, that aired just prior to the opening of the 114th General Assembly, kind of setting the stage for the work being done by our representatives as well as Governor Bill Lee. So let's take a look at Tori Gessner's story from earlier in January as we set the stage for our leaders to meet.
Walk into the Capitol, and the sounds of protesters fill every corner. It's the first day of the legislative session in 2026. But the Republican supermajority has already been hard at work behind the scenes, getting some help from the White House. House Speaker Cameron Sexton reportedly collaborating with U.S. Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller to crack down on illegal immigration in Tennessee. Republicans, like House Majority Leader William Lamberth, in full support.
If you're a legal immigrant or a citizen, you're welcome in Tennessee. But if you're an illegal immigrant, you are simply not welcome here. So you're going to see a number of bills that are filed by a lot of my colleagues to make sure that Tennessee really tightens up our laws to make sure that we are insistent that you come here legally, not illegally.
Other Republican-backed immigration bills have already been filed, including one that would make it a crime for someone in the country illegally to drive a commercial vehicle in the state. Another that would keep certain immigration enforcement actions confidential, making it a felony if someone didn't follow the law. Arguably, the most controversial proposal so far would require families to prove their child is a U.S. citizen or pay tuition to go to public school.
The same as if a kid in Robertson County wanted to come to Sumner County. They don't live in Sumner County. They're not a lawful resident of Sumner County. They would have to pay a tuition to be able to come into Sumner County schools. That happens throughout the state.
It passed the Senate last year. The House is just waiting for the feds to confirm the state wouldn't lose out on $1.1 billion in federal education funding if they passed it.
It's really concerning that the Republican agenda for this session is coming from Washington, D.C., and some of the worst in the White House.
Democrats, despite being in a super minority, plan to push back with their own bills on immigration, including one that would ban ICE from schools, churches, and government-owned lots.
Every Tennessean deserves good representation that's working to improve their life. That's what we would like to spend our time up here doing. Unfortunately, Republicans are taking orders from Stephen Miller, and so we're gonna have to battle it out this year.
Reporting in Nashville, I'm Tori Gessner.
That was Tori Gessner reporting just prior to the start of the session with some of the high priority topics, certainly immigration, both statewide as well as nationally, taking center stage right now, and Tennessee leaders at the forefront on both sides of that debate. Let's bring back in Senator Bobby Harshbarger. You watched the story, Senator Harshbarger. First thoughts, we can start even with the education component. That seems to stick out. Your thoughts on the direction we're going statewide?
Right. Well, thank you for that one. That was probably one of the last bills we voted on in session. It seemed to me that I started the session with controversy surrounding education with the vouchers, and then I ended my first session on controversy surrounding education. So I voted in favor of that particular bill, and I looked at it a little bit differently. I looked at it as in the intent of the bill was to give power back to local LEAs, local Board of Education, because I feel in my heart of hearts that those folks know their communities more than some unelected bureaucrat in Nashville. And I wouldn't imagine, once again, I'll tell you this, I've learned not to assume anything in this role, and I've learned to be skeptical of everything. But with that, I did assume that my local LEAs and my local Board of Education members would do the right thing. And on top of that, I think it mentioned in the clip that you're dealing with funding and the risk of losing both state and federal funding. So the likelihood of that actually taking place would be fairly low. And then going back to, I've got two small children in public education, and one of the very first things that was required to them to actually be eligible to go was to show proof that I lived within city limits. So, kind of going back to what Leader Lamberth is, that argument, I followed the same suit.
As far as the topic as a whole, your first thoughts as you get together, and that's certainly a priority throughout the state, and what we can see as residents in the state of Tennessee through our representatives moving forward as we try to find middle ground on this issue.
Right. Well, I do know for certain the vast majority, if not all, of the new legislation coming down the pike will come through my committee in the Senate Judiciary. Because we don't have any subcommittees in the Senate, everything flows through the main committee. And that was one of the key points in the special session last year was the immigration and trying to build that conduit between the federal government and the state government, trying to give locals more, really, I believe we added $25 million or so. Don't quote me because I've slept since then. But we've provided funding for local sheriff's departments to apply for the 287G grant just to be able to perform that function.
Interesting stuff. You heard from Democrat John Ray Clemens speaking on behalf of the minority, and describe what you heard from him as he says it's nothing more than a mirror of what we see at the federal level, and trying to bring it here to the state of Tennessee.
Well, I think one of the arguments is, we're not a border state, but in reality we are. We touch, I believe, is it 8 states we connected to? So, we are a border state. And we've got the artery of the interstate system traveling through. So we see this more than some other areas. So I disagree with the minority leader there. I feel that I think we're moving in the right direction. And once again, I've not seen the language. I'll have a better idea of once I read that language, but 9 times out of 10, I'll probably be in favor of that, but we'll see.
Also another big issue statewide, certainly here in the Tri-Cities, is health care, health services. We see from the flood some of the issues that Unicoi County and other counties are dealing with. We're lucky here in the Tri-Cities to have another representative, Senator Rusty Crowe, as the chair of the Health and Welfare Committee. We heard from him earlier as the session began, as he talks about some of his main topics. Let's take a look and listen, Senator Crowe and Senator Harshbarger, we'll get your thoughts on that.
It looks like, as chair of the Health Committee, I'll be spending a lot of time on President Trump's rural health transformation program, and we have that packet with us. We were given to us yesterday. Each state will be able to receive about $1 billion for their health care in rural areas, and as our counties were the ones that were most damaged by the flood, Representative Alexander, Jones, Hill, and myself have been given bills that will streamline the reimbursement process to get our counties and the people we serve reimbursed in hopefully a much quicker way. The current process has taken way too long, and people have not been helped as they needed to be as quickly as we could have.
So we get Senator Crow's initial thoughts on that. Senator Harshbarger, your thoughts. You're the second vice chair of that committee as you begin to put together a plan for the people of Northeast Tennessee and the state of Tennessee. Your thoughts?
Yeah, being second vice chair, I think it's important for folks in our region to remember how important it is to have both the chair and second vice chair representing our Upper East Tennessee. And especially with healthcare, because we have a very unique setup when it comes to the other states, or other states, other counties, other regions of the state. The Rural Health Transformation Initiative coming out of the Big Beautiful Bill, that's a $50 billion pot of money that all 50 states will be competing against one another. This first phase, we all receive equal portions. Then in future phases, we will literally be competing against one another based on a rubric submitted by CMS. So the Centers for Medicare, Medicaid, they created this rubric, they score. It's almost like we're going back to school again. And we, depending on what legislation we currently have and what we propose to pass in the future, is how we're graded. I believe the application was due back in November of last year. So that submission has already been made. So now it'll be up to the General Assembly to fulfill those, for lack of a better word, those promises or commitments. So that's going to come right through my committee. Everything will come through health. Once again, we have no subcommittees, so I'll see anything and everything. The two things that really stick out to me that I think most folks in this area will be interested in is certificate of need. When you say that to someone on the street, they may not have an idea of what it is. But what this does is it creates, in my opinion, somewhat of a barrier to competition. So when you look back at CMS, one of the rubric items was to get a 100 on their scoring system, you had to completely abolish certificate of need. That's to get a 100. And of course, in our application from the state, as well as the Department of Health, we proposed that we were going to completely abolish CON this year. That was really the only line item in that application that was, in my opinion, that was the most specific. Now, I don't know. I've tried to get test the water, see what the temperature was from other members, and I think it's lukewarm. But I am excited to see what happens there, because especially in our region, I think that would increase competition for our people, and that's what everyone has been screaming from the hilltops that they've wanted over the last decade or so. And I think it's going to work out, because in the end, I just want to have the best healthcare system we can possibly have. Same thing with schools, whether it's a private school, public school, charter school, whether it's a value-based care, fee-for-service. I just want to make sure we have every option available, because the running joke has always been that East Tennessee ends in Knoxville, and as we all know, it does not. So that's what you've sent me to Nashville, is to represent you. And I think this is one of the first things that can really make a difference in healthcare, was that CON. The second thing is scope of practice. That's where we're looking at giving broader responsibilities to nurse practitioners, physician assistants. Pharmacists are included with that. That's really what perked my interest, being a pharmacist by trade. And I believe dental hygienists are also included in that rubric. Now, that was pretty vague, and once again, I've not seen any language on that, and I really haven't even seen the language on CON, so everything is to be determined, but that's probably, in my opinion, the most exciting thing of this session.
Yeah, about 200 million, according to CMS, is roughly the state payout. And as you mentioned, once we go through the additional phases, that's when it starts to separate a little bit.
Right.
And where our leaders got to get in and fight for Tennessee and get some of that money flowing here, and then ultimately to the people of Northeast Tennessee.
Absolutely.
Which is so interesting to see how all that comes together. That's why we thank you for coming in and kind of boiling everything down for us. You know, we talked about health, we talked about immigration, education. Is something, you know, you get into year two, that seemed to dominate year one. We'll start with the vouchers. Year one in the books, going on to year two. Governor Lee talks about expansion. What does it mean for our region as it relates to other places like Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, where the private school, public school relationship seems to be a little different than it is here in the Tri-Cities?
Yeah, and that, in all honesty, when I was going through the campaigning for this position, never would I have thought education would have been one of the, if not the top, in the top two issues that constituents had. So I had to educate myself on what the different scenarios were. And our region is different from others, like you'd mentioned, whether it's Knoxville, Chattanooga, Nashville, Memphis, because we are not inundated with private institutions. We don't have charter schools. We're public educated. So for me, when I was getting educated on the subject, I tried not to put myself in a silo or an echo chamber, and that's all I heard. So I really tried to go out and find the other reasonings. And it all came down to this, and I think this does carry over to the question of expansion. My issue has always been the sustainability of funding, because when we are receiving less federal dollars from the government, that's the one thing you're going to hear is the budget's going to be tight this year. And you know, when you look at the $60 billion budget, about half of that is federal dollars. And that's kind of why the budget has literally ballooned pretty much doubled over the last decade, is those federal dollars. So after COVID, after that ARPA money comes, that's starting to shrivel up and go away, expire. So now we're going to have to start using our money. So we're not able to use Dad's money anymore. So we're going to have to start determining what programs we want to continue, what do we want to extend, what do we want to stop. So before we get those figures in line, that's just where I'm a little bit hesitant on, are we going to do more than what we had passed last session? As soon as that bill passed, I reached out to my local superintendents, and I think I even mentioned it to the network, is we can't put our heads in the sand and say, this didn't happen, you know, we're not going to work. We have to do everything we can to have the best education in this region, period. So if it does get expanded, we'll see. Once again, I'm not seeing any language. I think it really comes down to the funding mechanism and whether we're going to have those sufficient funds. Now, I will say this, and I've been on the record before, and I thought just for a second when the president came out, I think it was the day before we made the vote, I thought that he's going to do it. We're going to have a federal tax credit for tuition. Of course, that didn't happen, but I would be more in favor of a federal tax credit that you could take and utilize for tuition versus using our state dollars. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, didn't quite get there.
No.
It was close. As Summer EBT, just have a couple of minutes left here in this segment. Just at the beginning of the year, found that Tennessee's going to opt out of that. What that means for people here in our region.
You know, I've been in close communications with Second Harvest Food Bank. They provide a wealth of resources to those who are, food insecure, and I really focus on the children. And I remember having meetings every 15 minutes with something, and I said, if it has anything to do with the child or an animal, you bring it. Otherwise, I'm at my wit's end. And of course, everybody and their brother showed up with bills about children and animals after that.
Right.
But I think I understand where the governor and the folks in finance are looking at. They want to look at positive outcomes, and from what I've gathered, we're able to use fewer dollars. The only issue is I believe from the numbers that were originally given is we're feeding technically less children than what was on the federal program. So I always it almost goes back to the voucher. I chase a lot of rabbits, but it's almost going back to the voucher. We passed it. We've literally had, a year of this. I'd like to see how this expands, and then we can go back and create it versus, throwing more money at it. I want to see those outcomes. And this is the same thing. We've started this program. This is, the governor has decided not to sign this. So let's just see how this pursues, and then if we need to change it, let's do it.
District 4 Tennessee State Senator Bobby Harshbarger taking time as we begin the 114th General Assembly. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I know how busy you are, and even more busy this week. So to come and speak directly to your constituents is much appreciated. And as the session goes on, hopefully we can sit down and kind of do an update as things move forward.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll be right back. You're watching Tri-Cities This Week. Welcome back to Tri-Cities This Week. We are inside the WJHL Plus Digital Center, where we get together every week and discuss the happenings going on in Nashville through our representatives, and more importantly, how it affects all of us here in the Tri-Cities, statewide, and even nationally. I'm Casey Marler, joined this segment by News Channel 11 reporter Haley Pitcher. We're going to dive into HB 1470. The sponsor is Tim Hicks. And this deals with AI, which it seems everything these days deals with AI, right, Haley?
Yes.
And health and mental health. And you had a chance to hear from representatives. First of all, before we get into Representative Hicks, what are your first takeaways as you begin to have conversations about this new technology and mental health?
Yeah, so recently, Casey, AI has become almost a replacement for, especially the younger generation, for that licensed therapist, that psychiatric help. And by what we've kind of seen in the news and legal terms, it hasn't turned out so well. Just yesterday, there are reports of a lawsuit against OpenAI after ChatGPT encouraged a Colorado man to kill himself. And just last year, which is a case that brought upon this bill, according to Hicks, was Google and Character AI are preparing to settle a lawsuit after a Florida teen who was 14 committed suicide after being encouraged to do so by a chatbot. So House Bill 1417, what it basically does is prohibits the development or deployment of an artificial intelligence system that markets itself that it's meant for mental health counsel. And here is sponsor Representative Tim Hicks of District 6 speaking on it.
If there's any mental health counseling to be done, it has to come from a human, because actually AI now is actually giving counseling lessons, and it's not working out real well. They've actually had teenagers to commit suicide after those counseling sessions with AI. So I think that's an extremely important bill to work on, and you're going to hear a lot about AI.
Yeah, you heard Representative Hicks there. Haley Pitcher joining us here on Tri-Cities This Week. You talked to other professionals and got their thoughts on AI, technology, and mental health.
Yes. So earlier today, I spoke with Frontier Health's Dr. Tim Perry, who says while AI can definitely become a very helpful industry, especially in economics and more, like I said, economic industries, it's not going to help in mental health. And that's because AI doesn't have empathy. It can only replicate empathy, and it doesn't have the empathy that a human being sitting across from you can give you and give you that proper licensed care. Additionally, AI is meant to positively affirm. So an example is if you are paranoid that maybe someone is following you, maybe the government is watching you, and you type that into ChatGPT, ChatGPT is meant to affirm that sentiment to you that yes, someone is following you. Here is how you can take action towards that. So ChatGPT is just fed information, and it kind of just spits it back out to you.
There's also a bit of a feud, have about a minute, at least a contradiction between federal policy and state policy in the state of Tennessee.
Yes. So in December of 2025, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 14179, which removes barriers on AI development in order to keep the United States a pioneer in and very strong in our AI development, which we are quite leading in artificial intelligence development. But the executive order, does not apply to child safety precautions. So in any case where AI endangers children, that law does not apply, and thus states can add barriers to AI development. Yet right now, it does not include those barriers towards mental health counseling. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this develops in the State House. Currently, Utah and North Carolina are ignoring that sentiment. So like I said, it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, fantastic job kind of unwinding this AI and technology moving so fast. And mental health is a race against time, and these two are merging both federally and statewide. Haley Pitcher doing some deep dive into this very important legislation going on in the state of Tennessee. Haley, thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey.
And thank you for joining us on Tri-Cities This Week. If you want to keep up to date with all of the work going on in Nashville, we have come up with a way to make it so easy. We have on WJHL Plus a running QR code and quick links to all of the events going on in Nashville. So you'll see this QR code. The session lasts until mid to late spring. All you got to do is flash your phone, take a picture of the QR code. It will take you directly to WJHL Plus and all of our quick links on important legislation going on throughout the state of Tennessee. In the meantime, join us every week for Tri-Cities This Week as we break down legislation and, more importantly, how it affects us here in the Tri-Cities and throughout the state of Tennessee. Thanks for joining us on Tri-Cities This Week. I'm Casey Marlar. We'll see you next week.